Imagine waking up decades from now, still, effortlessly picking up your grandkids, maybe tackling that hike you love, or just moving through your day feeling strong, feeling vital. That's really the promise of health span, isn't it? Not just adding years, but adding good active years. But there's this quiet thief that often creeps in as we age, kind of undermining that whole idea, muscle loss. It's a challenge so many people face, and sometimes you don't even realize the full impact until it feels a bit late.
And a quiet thief, it actually has a name, sarcopenia.
Hmm.
It's the age-related decline in muscle mass, yes, but also function. And that dramatically increases your risk of falls. It can lead to mobility issues and ultimately contribute to frailty.
Okay, sarcopenia.
That's tied into a fundamental biological process called muscle protein synthesis, or MPS, building muscle, basically. Now, here's where it gets a bit tricky with age. Our muscle cells, they sort of develop hearing loss for protein signals.
Hearing loss, how so?
Well, they still get the message, but they become less responsive to the signals that tell them to build protein, even when you eat a protein-rich meal. We call this age-related anabolic resistance. And the impact isn't trivial. It could reduce muscle protein synthesis by as much as 30%.
Wow, 30%, that's significant.
It is. Think of it like your body needing a much louder, clearer signal to get the construction crew in your muscles to actually start building.
Okay, so a 30% reduction is huge. It really sounds like our bodies are fighting this uphill battle just to maintain muscle as we get older. So if our muscles are getting a bit stubborn, let's say, how can we overcome that? How do we keep building or at least maintaining muscle?
That's the core question, isn't it?
And that leads us right into our mission for this deep dive. We're looking at a really groundbreaking study published just this year in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. It digs into the very foundation of our protein recommendations, especially for older adults. And it asks this critical question: is simply eating more protein the answer? Or does the type of protein really make the difference in the state of anabolic resistance?
Exactly. This study gets right down to it. It compares different protein supplements, specifically whey, pea, and collagen, and looks at how they impact muscle building in older men. They measured something very specific, integrated myofibrillar protein synthetic rates, basically how much muscle was actually built over a week when these proteins were consumed above the standard recommended dietary allowance, the RDA.
Okay.
And what's fascinating is that the findings really challenge some long-held ideas about protein and aging. It forces us to rethink what enough protein truly means, and maybe what kind of enough matters most.
Yeah, given that anabolic resistance, it really makes you wonder, are the current guidelines we have even close to adequate? Let's dive into the protein predicament for older adults. The current RDA for protein in the US and Canada is what, 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight per day?
That's right, 0.8 gkg.
And the surprising thing, to me anyway, is that it's the same number for all adults. Young, old, doesn't matter. But for older adults who are dealing with this anabolic resistance you just described, that general guideline seems like it could fall critically short.
It really highlights a potential disconnect, doesn't it? If older adults are less efficient at using protein to build and maintain muscle, well, shouldn't their intake reflect that decreased efficiency?
Logically, yes.
And many expert groups, consensus statements from leading researchers in geriatrics and nutrition, they actually argue for significantly higher protein intake. They're talking closer to 1.0, maybe 1.2 grams per kilogram per day.
So quite a bit higher than the 0.8.
Definitely. The current RDA, you could argue, just doesn't fully account for the biological reality of aging muscle. It's like using the basic instruction manual when you're facing a much more complex situation.
So if the science seems to be pointing towards higher needs, why do you think the official RDA hasn't quite caught up yet, especially for this older group? And besides just the total amount, are there other factors we're missing?
Well, a lag in updating public health guidelines versus emerging research that's a whole other conversation, maybe for another deep dive. But yes, you hit on something crucial. It's not just how much protein, but also when you eat it.
Timing.
Right. This study and others point out that many older adults get the bulk of their protein at dinner, breakfast and lunch, often quite low in protein.
Okay, so it's skewed towards the end of the day.
Exactly. And think about your muscles needing a steady supply of building blocks. If you only get one huge delivery late in the day, you're missing chances to stimulate muscle building earlier. It's like trying to build a house but only getting one truckload of bricks delivered at 5 p.m. You need more consistent deliveries throughout the day to keep the crew working.
That's a great analogy, a more regular delivery service for our muscles. But, I bet some listeners are thinking, okay, but protein is protein, right? If I hit my total grams, I'm good. Why might that be a flawed way to think, especially for older bodies?
That's a really common assumption, and it's important to challenge it. Because not all proteins are created equal when it comes to muscle building. Protein quality is incredibly important,
Quality, meaning.
meaning the amino acid profile.
Hmm.
Animal-based proteins, like whey, are typically seen as higher quality because they have a great profile of essential amino acids, or EAAs, especially leucine.
Leucine again.
Leucine is key. It acts like a critical on switch, a trigger for muscle protein synthesis. Plant-based proteins like pea protein can also be very effective, especially if they're optimized, maybe blended, to improve that amino acid mix. But others, like collagen, which we'll get into, have real limitations because their amino acid makeup just isn't ideal for building muscle tissue. So it's not just about the grams, it's about having the right amino acids in the right amounts at the right time.
This all makes sense conceptually, but testing it scientifically must be complex. How did the McMaster University researchers actually set up this study to test these ideas rigorously?
They designed it very carefully. They recruited 31 healthy older men, average age around 72. And this wasn't just, asking them what they ate. It was a meticulously controlled, double-blind, randomized trial. Real deep science.
Okay. Double-blind, randomized, the gold standard.
Exactly. Each participant went through 2 different 7-day phases. First was the control phase. During this week, everyone ate a standardized diet, with protein locked at the standard RDA at 0.8 grams per kilogram per day. And critically, like we just discussed, this diet mimicked typical eating habits, with most protein packed into the dinner meal. So it reflected that uneven distribution.
Got it. Establishing a baseline reflecting typical, maybe suboptimal patterns.
Precisely. Then came the intervention, the supplemental phase. Participants stayed on that same standardized base diet, but they added an extra 50 grams of protein each day.
50 grams, that's a substantial boost.
It is. And importantly, it was split into 2 25-gram servings, one added to breakfast, one added to lunch. So this did 2 things. It boosted their total daily protein to about 1.3 grams per kilogram per day, much closer to those expert recommendations, and it ensured a much more even spread throughout the day, providing those consistent deliveries.
Okay, makes sense. Addressing quantity and timing. But how did they compare the different protein types?
This is the clever part. They divided the men into 3 groups. During that supplemental phase, each group got one specific type of protein supplement, whey, pea, or collagen. And crucially, the supplements looked and tasted the same. Neither the participants nor the researchers knew who was getting which protein. That's the double-blind aspect, essential for removing bias.
So they could really isolate the effect of the protein source itself.
That was the goal.
Mm-hmm.
And to measure the actual impact, the real muscle building, they used some pretty sophisticated techniques. Participants drank deuterated water, which is basically harmless heavy water that acts as a tracer.
Like a tag?
Kind of. Think of it like a tiny invisible tracker for protein components. By measuring how much of this heavy water got incorporated into new muscle protein over the entire week, they could get a very precise measure of integrated myofibrillar protein synthesis. That's the actual rate of new muscle protein being built over time. It's not just a snapshot, it's the accumulation over the whole period.
Wow, okay, so not just measuring blood levels, but actual tissue incorporation. That sounds definitive.
It's a very powerful technique. They also looked at the immediate effects, those acute anabolic signaling pathways, like MTRC1 and plasma amino acid levels, right after consuming the protein.
Yeah.
So they got the immediate signals and long-term building results.
Okay, let's get to the results. This is where it gets really interesting, right? Because the initial hypothesis was pretty simple. Just adding more protein, any protein, above the RDA should boost muscle building in these older guys.
That was the expectation, yes. More protein equals more building blocks, should equal more muscle synthesis. But the results told a slightly different story, a more nuanced one.
How so?
Well, during that supplemental phase, the groups getting the whey protein and the pea protein, they both showed a significant jump in their integrated MPS rates.
They did build more muscle.
Yes, about a 9% increase compared to when they were just getting the RDA during the control week. That's a clear win for whey and pea protein. It shows that if you provide enough high-quality protein, even older muscles can ramp up synthesis.
Okay, 9% increase with whey and pea. That's solid proof of concept. But what about the collagen group? This is the part I think might surprise people.
Right. And here's the real jaw-dropper, perhaps. For the men consuming the extra 50 grams of collagen protein daily, their integrated MPS rates did not significantly increase.
No increase at all.
Essentially no significant change compared to when they were just eating the standard RDA diet. Despite adding all that extra collagen protein, their rate of muscle protein synthesis over the week remained pretty much the same.
Wow. So this completely goes against the more protein is always better idea. It really points to the type being critical.
Absolutely. It hammers home the importance of protein quality. Why did collagen fall short? It boils down to those essential amino acids, especially leucine. Exactly. Collagen protein just has a much lower EAA content, and particularly a lower leucine content, compared to whey or pea. The amount of leucine provided by that 50 grams of collagen likely wasn't enough to consistently hit the leucine threshold needed to really switch on muscle protein synthesis effectively throughout the day.
Can you quantify that difference in leucine?
Yeah, the study notes are quite specific. Per serving, the whey supplement had about 140% more leucine than the collagen, and the pea supplement had about 131% more leucine. That's a massive difference in the key signaling molecule.
Huge difference. So not enough of the right signal.
Not enough of the right signal, and potentially not enough of the essential building blocks themselves, the EAAs, provided by collagen.
Okay, but what about those immediate signals you mentioned? The mTORC1 pathway. Did collagen at least, ring the doorbell even if nobody started building?
That's actually a fascinating part of the results. The study found that the standard breakfast they provided, which only had about 15 grams of protein, wasn't enough on its own to really activate that key mTORC1 pathway.
Okay, so baseline breakfast wasn't cutting it for signaling.
Right. But when they added the 25-gram protein supplement, whether it was whey, pea, or collagen, it did activate those signaling pathways. It boosted the signal.
Wait, so collagen did activate the initial signal, but then didn't lead to more muscle building over the week. How does that work?
It seems paradoxical, right? But it really highlights the difference between an immediate short-term signal and sustained long-term results. Think of it again like the construction site.
Right.
Ringing the doorbell and turning on the lights, acute signaling is one thing. That signaled, okay, time to potentially build.
Uh-huh.
But if you don't continuously deliver enough of the right materials, the high-quality bricks and lumber, meaning EAAs and especially leucine, the actual construction integrated MPS, won't happen effectively over the long haul.
Okay. So the signal happened, but the necessary materials weren't sufficient with collagen.
Precisely. Collagen could flip the switch momentarily, but it didn't provide enough of the high-quality essential amino acid, particularly leucine, to fuel the actual building process over the full week. And the plasma amino acid data back this up. Whey caused the biggest and most sustained spike in blood amino acids, followed by pea. Collagen led to much lower levels. You need those building blocks to actually get into the muscle cells in high enough concentrations to make a difference.
That makes so much sense when you break it down like that. The signal isn't enough. You need the materials. Okay, so pulling all this together, this deep dive offers some really clear, actionable takeaways for anyone thinking about muscle health and aging, about extending their health span.
Definitely.
First, it seems pretty undeniable now. The standard RDA for protein, that 0.8 g/kg, is likely just not enough for many older adults trying to fight off sarcopenia and maintain muscle.
The evidence is certainly mounting. Experts recommending more, like 1.0 to 1.2 g/kg, or even the 1.3 g/kg used effectively in the study's supplemental phase, seem to be on the right track.
Second, and maybe even more critical based on these findings, the source of your protein matters a lot.
Immensely. Just piling on more protein isn't the answer if it's not the right kind of protein. It needs to be higher quality, rich in those essential amino acids, particularly leucine. Whey and pea demonstrated they could do the job here, boosting that integrated MPS. Collagen, in this context, did not. Quality really trumps sheer quantity for this outcome.
And third, don't forget the timing. The distribution matters.
Absolutely vital. Shifting some protein away from potentially one huge dinner meal and boosting intake at breakfast and lunch seems key. It helps overcome that anabolic resistance by providing those necessary amino acid signals and building blocks more consistently throughout the day. Multiple opportunities to stimulate MPS.
Consistent deliveries.
Exactly. Now, while this study was specifically in healthy older males, the findings give us strong evidence. Strategically increasing your intake and making sure you distribute high-quality protein, whether it's from animal sources like whey or good plant sources like pea, looks like a very viable strategy.
A strategy to enhance muscle protein synthesis, support muscle mass as we age,
and ultimately contribute to a longer, healthier, more independent life, really boosting that health span.
Of course, we should mention the caveats. It was only men in this study. And they didn't directly measure muscle protein breakdown, though MPS is generally seen as the more adaptable side of the equation.
Good points. And the researchers themselves are quick to point out that protein doesn't work in a vacuum. It works best synergistically with resistance exercise.
Right, the fuel and the spark.
Precisely. So combining these smart dietary approaches with consistent resistance training, that's likely the most powerful combination for preserving muscle and function as we get older.
So wrapping this up, you've heard the science. It's pretty clear. Just eating more protein isn't the full story. The quality and the timing are arguably just as important, maybe more so for aging muscle. Whey and pea protein, when eaten strategically, gave a significant boost to muscle building in these older men. They helped combat age-related muscle loss. Collagen, maybe surprisingly to some, didn't offer those same muscle-building benefits in this study, proof that not all proteins are equal for this specific job.
And connecting this back to the bigger picture, this research gives us really powerful, actionable insights for extending your health span, for, compressing those years of potential disease and disability that can come with aging. It's about empowering you, the listener, to make informed choices about your diet that directly support your physical strength, your mobility, your quality of life for years to come, building that strong foundation.
Okay, so here's a final thought, something provocative for you to chew on. Given what we've learned today, how might you reconsider your own daily protein intake? Are you really getting enough, not just total grams, but are you getting enough of the right kind of high quality protein, rich in leucine? And maybe just as importantly, how are you distributing it? Is your breakfast and lunch really working for your muscles? What simple changes could you perhaps make starting tomorrow to better fuel your muscles and actively support your health span, helping you live not just longer, but truly vibrantly better?